Ever had a seemingly ordinary grocery trip take a terrifying turn? As a mother of three, I thought I'd seen it all, until one fateful night changed everything. I'm the mother of three, and as you can imagine, our grocery bills are quite high. My husband works at a tech company, while I stay at home raising our kids, who are 10, 7, and 3. I go grocery shopping at least twice a week, usually at the King Coupon near our house, or sometimes at the nearby Target. Those are two of the very few grocery stores in our quiet town. Just to give you some context, this incident happened not even a year ago when I was 39 and running behind on shopping one day. I went much later than usual, and King Coupon closes at 10 p.m. It was definitely past 9 o'clock already, so I hurried over to the store with my flyers and coupons. The kids were complaining about the lack of food in the house, so I needed to squeeze in a quick grocery run. For once, I was able to go shopping alone, which I considered a luxury. I arrived at King Coupon, which was pretty empty at that hour since it was close to closing time. I grabbed a cart and quickly started making my rounds down the aisles, picking up whatever was on my list and whatever was on sale. I was in the cereal aisle when I felt a tap on my shoulder that startled me. I turned and saw a very tan man about my height, wearing a baseball cap, a black goatee, and a red zip-up hoodie with jeans. He apologized for startling me and said he had been looking everywhere for a specific bag of chips that was in my cart. I politely told him the aisle and led him directly to where I found the chips. He thanked me, his breath unpleasant, and I smiled, intending to walk back to my cart. But then he started making pointless conversation about why he liked those chips so much. Something silly about the ingredients or a lack of a specific ingredient. I kept trying to make it obvious that I was inching my way back to my cart. He didn't get the hint though. When he suddenly paused and said, "Gosh, you're pretty," I felt a chill. I managed a quick thank you and told him I had to get back to my shopping before they closed. I walked away, but he followed me, still talking. Finally, I firmly told him that I really just wanted to shop in peace. He seemed to get the hint and walked away. However, for the rest of my time in the store, I kept seeing that man circling the aisles. Each time he walked past the aisle I was in, he'd slow down or even stop to just stare at me. My discomfort grew and I hurried up my shopping. When I was finally done, I went to the checkout. As I emptied my cart, here came the red hoodie guy again, with just 2 or 3 items, standing right behind me in line. He didn't say a word, but I felt his gaze even through the back of my head. After I finished checking out, I pushed my cart away, and the man called out, "Have a good night, ma'am." I ignored it. As I unloaded my car, I noticed the red hoodie guy in the parking lot looking at me. He got into that junky old Honda that looked like it was at least 30 years old, but he didn't turn the car on. He just sat there. I finally finished loading my car, got inside, started it, and began driving out of the parking lot. I looked in my rearview mirror a few times and didn't see any headlights behind me, so I felt safe driving home. But it wasn't until I pulled into the driveway and looked to my left down the street that I realized there was a car with its headlights off, driving slowly down the street, approaching our house. It pulled over to the curb a few houses down. It looked like that Honda from the parking lot. I went inside the house and called my husband's name. He came downstairs looking concerned, and I told him I had been followed home by a creep. He hurried outside to the stoop, but by this time the car was already gone. The following weekend, late at night while we were all in bed, we heard some shuffling around outside in the side yard. I shook my husband to go check what it was, and he slid the window open. He saw someone right below the window, trying to open the side gate to the backyard. But after hearing the window slide open, the man looked up and started to run. My husband grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and ran outside. When he came back a minute later, he said he saw the car speeding down the street and tried to chase after it. He perfectly described the junky Honda that the red hoodie guy was driving. We called the police, and given the late hour, an officer arrived at our house in under 5 minutes. I described the man and his car the best I could, and that was that. He never returned to our house, not after my angry husband chased his car on foot with a bat. It still leaves me uncomfortable that a creep like that knows where I live, though. When I was in college, I worked at Waboom's, a 24-hour store. A couple of unfortunate people always got stuck working that awful overnight shift. I thought since I was 20 and in college, my boss would never put me on that shift. But when she asked about my school schedule and I told her I was off Mondays and Wednesdays, she saw me as the perfect sucker to stick on overnight shifts. One day I saw that I was scheduled for a Tuesday night from midnight to 8 a.m. I had to triple check the schedule to make sure that was right. I felt sick seeing that, and when I asked my supervisor why I was scheduled for the overnight shift, he told me if I was over 18, I didn't really have a choice. I considered quitting, but I needed the job and money, so I sucked it up and decided I'd do it this one time and then tell my boss I couldn't do it again because I had to study for school. So I arrived at the store at midnight to relieve my coworker Amanda. Half the lights in the store were out to save on electricity. Surprisingly, there were more customers in the store than I expected. More than 3 at that hour, though the place was still mostly dead. As the night went on, fewer and fewer customers remained. By 2 a.m., I was as bored as humanly possible. It had been over an hour since the last customer came through. I wondered if there were any other employees in the building. Surely they wouldn't have a lone 20-year-old running the whole place by herself. I spotted a bald guy who looked like he could be a manager passing by the front registers every few minutes. He had a keyring attached to his khakis with like 10 keys on it and was holding a small backpack-type bag in his hand. I said, "Excuse me, are you the manager?" He came over and asked if it was my first day on the job. I replied that it was my first night shift. He shook my hand without introducing himself and then asked if I could go to the back warehouse of the store to organize the pallets. He said he'd watch the front. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I figured I'd figure it out. I walked toward the back of the store, and as I did, I saw him doing something to the entrance door, like he was reaching for some switch on the side of it, as if he were locking it. I made my way into the back warehouse, where I saw a tall man who looked about 30, wearing a manager's vest that said Wabooms. He saw my apron and introduced himself as Rob, the night manager. I said, "Oh, I thought the guy in the front was the night manager," and he looked puzzled. "Who?" he asked when I described the bald man. He asked me to show him who I was talking about, but we didn't even make it out of the warehouse before all the lights in the store turned off. Rob told me to wait in the warehouse while he checked out what was going on. I watched as he walked through the warehouse doors into the darkness of the store, with only the light from the dairy coolers illuminating the way. I sat on a box on a pallet and pulled out my phone to text any friends who might be awake to let them know what was happening when I heard a door open from inside the warehouse. It was on the other side, separated by the freezer and dairy fridge. There were 2 ways in and out of the warehouse back into the store. I sat still, my ears perked, listening for any sounds, when I heard slow, quiet footsteps getting closer, followed by a voice saying, "Hey kid, you in here?" But it wasn't Rob's voice. I hurried out of the warehouse doors into the store and jogged to the front, calling out Rob's name. Nothing. I grabbed my jacket and tried to open the exit door, but it wouldn't open automatically. I tried to physically pull it, but it was locked. I heard footsteps approaching from behind me and turned, almost screaming, but realized it was Rob, the manager. He flicked a lever on the top right of the door and unlocked it, whispering in a panicked tone to hurry and get outside. He followed behind me as we left the store, and he immediately called the police. I overheard him saying something about a strange man wandering around the store who locked the door and wouldn't let him out. After we waited outside, the police arrived, but by that time the bald man was already gone. They took our statements and told us to be careful while working alone. I was so shaken up that I told my boss I couldn't do the night shifts anymore. Have you ever faced a frightening encounter like this? Share your story in the comments below. Your experiences could help others stay vigilant.